everyone, Ariel Adams here with aBlogtoWatch. Thank you for listening to this episode of Superlative. Listen to our other aBlogtoWatch podcast, aBlogtoWatch Weekly, where we cover the latest watch news and reviews. Today in Superlative, my guest is Vartkess Knadjian, and he is the CEO of Backes Strauss. Vartkess, welcome.
Ariel, I'm delighted to be on your show, on your podcast.
Thank you so much. You're an important person because you have a good story, and you know that this industry runs on stories, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I first became familiar with Backes Strauss a number of years ago now for two reasons. One, I thought the shapes were pretty. I thought these were really elegantly designed from a shape perspective. At the time, it was basically mostly round watches you would see out there. And these you have some round ones, but really, I think we'll agree. The whole point is really not to be round. So that struck my attention. And the second thing was this history of British luxury. I'm an American. I always sort of grew up an Anglophile. My grandfather probably had something to do with that. And so much of the watch industry, at least when I got into it, was mostly Swiss, of course, French, German. But I really didn't understand the core aesthetic, right, of what British luxury was. And I think Backes Strauss, at least for me, formed some idea of what that is. So I know you actually had a lot to do with that, but I'm just telling you the two things that struck to me about it. Obviously, it's been a number of years since you first encountered the brand. What was your first impression of it?
Of the brand?
Yeah.
Absolutely. When I had this opportunity to launch Backes Strauss, we wanted to be the quintessential British London brand. Because I don't know if many of your speakers will know that during the 19th century, London was the center for watchmaking.
Sure.
It wasn't Switzerland. In fact, there is a famous brand, Rolex, that was founded in London and only moved to Switzerland in 1919.
For the cheap labor.
Cheap labor. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But there was, and then also, if you look back in the history of watchmaking, 17th, 18th century, you have some wonderful British watchmakers who used the precision of watchmaking to travel abroad, to explore new territories. So the whole idea of Britishness was very, very important for us.
So I think it's important before we talk about Backes Strauss to talk about your own history. You sent a document to me a little while ago. Your son sent it over about Ottoman Knadjian, who was your father and had an incredible story. And I think the way to open it is moved from the Ottoman Empire to Ethiopia. That's a good opening for a story, right?
Absolutely. I was born in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, in 1955, and my father was also born in Addis Ababa in 1915. His family moved from the Ottoman Empire to Ethiopia around about 1910.
What were those places like at the time? I mean, I'm somewhat of a student of history, and I knew that was towards the end of the Ottoman Empire. I don't know too much about what was going on in Ethiopia at the time, but share some context about what these parts of the world were like at the time.
Well, the Ottoman Empire was beginning to look difficult for Armenians who had lived there for centuries. And there were a number of Armenians who were looking at opportunities to get out, to move on, find somewhere else to live, either Europe or discover new territories.
And that persists to this day.
Yeah, we're constantly on the move as people. And at that time, Ethiopia had just won in 1896 a very important battle against the Italians at the Battle of Adwa. And the emperor of Ethiopia at that time was Menelik. And after the battle, he wanted to develop the country, but he didn't want to go to a colonial power and say, come and help me develop the country. He went and recruited Armenians, Greek specialists, especially living in the Ottoman Empire or living in Egypt and Alexandria to move to Ethiopia. So that's how my father's family moved from the Ottoman Empire to Addis Ababa. And my father was
It's funny how
there.
for 2,000 years, people have been going to the Greeks to help them with things.
Yeah.
It was the Romans first.
Then the Greeks. Anyway, so my father was born there. There was a small Armenian community. He went to the Armenian school. He graduated from secondary school, and he wanted to continue his education. But at the age of 13, 14, his father said, no, you have to learn a trade. So he put him as an apprentice with a watchmaker in Addis Ababa. So
why a watchmaker? Was that random? There happened to be one nearby? We don't know.
There happened to be a family friend who was a watchmaker, and he was put
happy
with
accident.
him. Absolutely. But my father wanted to continue his education, but he accepted his father's decision, and he learned watchmaking under him, and then he set up his own little repair shop. And with the help of his mum, he managed to put some money aside, and in 1934 traveled to Europe to continue his education. He ended up in Paris, at an Armenian school in Paris, and he had a tough time because he was by now 18, 19 years old, and he was in class with 12, 13-year-old kids.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, because of the disturbance he had in his education.
Oh, so it's like the level you're at, not the age you're at.
Yeah.
I see.
And one of his friends in the school in Paris was from Geneva. So during the summer holidays, he said, come to Geneva and stay with us. And so my father came to Geneva. And his friend's father talked to him and advised him that as he had basic knowledge of watch repairing, why didn't he continue his education at the École d'Horlogerie in Geneva? Which was an idea my father fell for. He went, he registered, and he became a student there. And 4 years later, he graduated as a master watchmaker from the École d'Horlogerie of Geneva. So we're now 1939.
So interesting. From Ethiopia all the way to Geneva, such a random series of events. But as we know, when sort of non-Swiss or non-French go into watchmaking, they bring their culture into it. Something good always happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, please proceed.
And one of the things which I treasure most is he had to make a pocket watch for his final year, where he had to make everything from scratch. That was one of the, it was like a thesis you had to do to become a master watchmaker. So we're in 1939. There's war around Europe. Ethiopia has been invaded by Italy, and he no longer has an Ethiopian passport, but he has an Italian passport. He can't stay in Switzerland, so he does 6 months internship with Vacheron et Constantin, and then he travels to Milan, Italy, and he gets a job in Italy as a watchmaker for a couple of years. And then he decides that it's time for him to return back to Ethiopia. So he takes a boat from Genoa to Djibouti. He arrives in Djibouti, and the French at that time, Djibouti was a French colony, and the French were evacuating Djibouti. There was a boat going to Indochina, and there was a boat going to Madagascar. So my father was put on the boat to Madagascar.
Why were they evacuating?
Because of the war. There were, the Italians were still being evacuated out of Ethiopia. There was 1941.
Wow, very chaotic time.
1941, yeah.
So during World War II,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, so he ended up living in Madagascar for 2 years.
Wow.
And in 1943, Ethiopia was liberated, so he returned back to Ethiopia, and he started his own little workshop with a little shop attached to it. Meanwhile, the Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, who was a big amateur watch collector, heard about my dad, and he sent for him and he said, I encourage you, develop your business. So that encouraged my dad to go
How
back
cool.
to Geneva. And because he...
Well, what did that mean, develop your business? When like make watches, start a brand?
No. Bring watches, sell watches.
He wanted more watches in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. So my dad returned back to Switzerland, and he managed to get distribution rights exclusive for Patek, Vacheron, Omega, Jaeger-LeCoultre. And that's how his business started in Ethiopia.
How fantastic. And Ethiopia at that time, I know from some of the collectors, there were some really nice watches that came in. And they were also some of the ones that, bespoke painted dials and a lot of custom work.
Absolutely. The emperor ordered specific pieces. Yeah. And whenever he was in Geneva, he wanted to go and visit Patek Philippe.
So your father just sort of, was it because he was the Swiss trained watchmaker? I'm just wondering how he got on the radar of the rulers.
Because he was a Swiss trained watchmaker.
I guess that was rare. I mean, if you look at that journey he had to go through to do that, that couldn't have been common. I see. Absolutely.
And so imagine I'm born in 1955, and from a young age, we used to go to my dad's shop and workshop on Saturdays. We were three boys, so we used to take it in turns on Saturdays to go and accompany him. And that's where my passion started for watches. I used to watch him repair watches. Because in those days, repairing watches, you had to make some of the parts because you couldn't, and he had the capabilities of making parts and repairing watches. And So I grew this tremendous passion for watches, which I have maintained all my life.
So I want to talk a little bit about that time, because I imagine that there was not a lot of watch stores in Addis Ababa at the time, and that it was mostly just high end, or at least for the most part, everything that you did was. And I'm curious, what were the customers like? What types of people were they? What types of watches were they buying? Were they buying elegant watches, sport watches? What do you remember from that time?
Well, I remember there were only a couple of shops as we would know it today. Ethiopia, especially in the early 60s, became a very important destination because the emperor created the Organization of African Unity. So suddenly all these newly independent African countries sent their head of states, their presidents, their prime ministers came to Ethiopia. And I'll never forget in 1963, when the major conference was taking place, we had maybe all the major heads of states from the rest of the African countries come to the shop.
Wow.
And comment on the fact that, we wish we had a shop like this in our city.
Really? Yeah. Was it because it was just a nice store, great products? What were they admiring?
So, I mean, he had Patek, Omega, and he also imported Parker pens. Were you familiar?
Okay.
Parker pens, Ronson lighters, Dupont lighters. So it was a wonderful shop in the middle of Addis Ababa. And then in 1967, he sent us to boarding school in England. As he didn't have much of an opportunity to have a proper education, he wanted us to have a good education. So age 12, we were dispatched to boarding school in England, but always with the thought of returning and doing something in my father's business. And in 1972, I took a gap year between school and university. And I spent that gap year in Ethiopia working for my dad. And that was an incredible period for me because I was actively involved in placing the orders, selling to customers, handling the business on a day-to-day basis.
Did you know at the time that you wanted to go into the business? Or
100%. 100%.
Okay, so there was no doubt about it. You were going to go into watches.
I was going to go into the business, doing what my father does. And sadly, I was at university when there was a military coup in Ethiopia. The emperor was displaced, and a military government came in, initially benevolent, but eventually became a Marxist government, hell-bent on nationalizing land.
We'll call them
property.
Revolutionaries, right?
Yes. So in a matter of months, all my dreams were shattered.
That must have been an incredibly scary time.
It was very difficult.
And you know, you mentioned that your family was at least somewhat close with the ruling elite and the emperor. Was this something that you knew was coming? I'm just wondering how much of a shock this was when you finally hear about it on TV.
Well, it wasn't so much seeing it on TV, but on the streets, you know, people. It was a well-orchestrated coup. The emperor was, I think, 81 or 82 when he was replaced. And there was always a danger. We always talked about what would happen the day he's replaced. But when he came, it was always like a shock. And we had to carry on. So I was in the UK. Eventually, my parents managed to get out, and they moved to Canada to live in Canada.
You said eventually. Was it a hard thing to do? Because
it was a process. It was a process.
Interesting.
Because they had to organize themselves. And so my father left in 1976. Yeah. So meanwhile, I was in the UK, unable to return back to Ethiopia, and I had to start looking for employment. And fortunately, through a family friend, I was introduced to Benjamin Bonus. Benjamin Bonus owned Backes Strauss in those days. Okay. And he was one of the brokers that facilitated business between De Beers and their diamond cutting customers. And so in 1976, I joined Backes Strauss in London, and they sent me to Antwerp in Belgium to learn about the diamond business.
Okay, you were very young.
21.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just graduated from the LSE, and I thought, okay, let me give this diamond business a try.
And what did that mean? What was your job? Obviously, did you have to buy them? Did you have to negotiate? Was it about transportation? What was the actual work?
You know, initially it was learning about the diamond business. Unlike today, when you have the GIA and you've got a lot of information out there, in those days there wasn't much information. You had to learn about the business. And the only way you could learn about the business or about diamonds was by sitting with diamond polishers, diamond cleavers, and watching them. And learning from them. And it took a long time. And then also, once you had acquired this knowledge, again, you didn't have price lists, you didn't have certificates, so you had to learn to look at a diamond, be able to put a value to it. And the only value you put to it is what you could glean from the market. You know, you had to, it was an imperfect market. You had to learn, you had to see, you had to hear what people were paying.
It seems like a lot more fun than when you had all the price lists and grading and all that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, yeah. I was, in fact, one of the workshops I was sitting and sorting rough diamonds. I was together with Martin Rappaport. I don't know if you're familiar with Martin Rappaport.
The Rappaport.
Rappaport, yeah.
Yeah.
So Martin and I were sitting next to each other sorting rough diamonds.
Wow.
And he had come from New York and I was there from London. So it was an interesting time.
And you were buying stones to be put into products.
Eventually, once I acquired all this knowledge, and it took 3-4 years, I became a buyer. And at that time, Backes Strauss was a diamond manufacturer and a wholesaler. And we did not sell to retailers or to jewelry companies. We sold to other wholesalers.
Oh, I see. So you formed the stone.
So we would prepare businesses, we'd prepare a selection of diamonds for wholesalers who would come and buy from us from New York or from London or different places. And then they would sell on to manufacturers and retailers. It was
interesting. It's a complicated supply chain.
It was a complicated supply chain, but respected by everyone at that time.
So you learned diamonds, you learned stones, and what was the consumer market like? Were people as into luxury? I know obviously watches had diamonds, jewelry had diamonds. Like how was that a growing industry? I'm just curious what that was like.
No, in the 70s, luxury was still not on the horizon.
Yeah, because it was a bit of a down period.
Yeah, in the 70s, it was very much there was the diamond business was controlled by De Beers. Mm-hmm. They had 85% of world rough diamond supplies, which they supplied to the market, and they had created this incredible market. Diamonds are forever, and gifting the bridal diamond when you get married or engaged, and that was the major market. You would be selling diamonds to retail jewelers who would be offering them to young couples getting married. The statistics in those days were quite incredible. We used to sell diamonds to Japan. They used to say there was 750,000 weddings in Japan on an annual basis, and 75% of them got married with a diamond ring. So it's quite a large percentage if you. So
here's a question. I mean, diamonds, in a sense, they're not going to decay. They are forever, and I know that there's always these estate sales after people die. Of course, it's a bit morbid, but is there recycling, or is it just always, mining and refining new stones? It seems like it would be, I don't know, it would make sense to do that because every single year, as you said, there's just like more and more and more diamonds. Does that not have an effect on the desirability of diamonds?
Not really, because diamonds are recycled. People repolish stones. People use the diamonds.
So they are recycled. They are recycled.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very important part of the industry.
There's a big business on the bottom, right? There's a business on the top of selling it, of course, but then there's this business at the bottom of, it's again, a lot of it is after people die. Usually people don't sell their jewelry, but when they die, and then you have often gorgeous stones that could be broken apart, put into new things. It just, I'm not in it, but it just seems that would be logical, right?
Yeah, that happens. Okay, absolutely.
So that does happen. So when did the watch part come into it at Backes Strauss? Were they making watches at the time? I don't think they were.
No. So I'll give you a brief background to Backes Strauss. So Backes Strauss was founded in 1789 in Germany.
Yeah, crazy old.
In Hanau. And Backes was a goldsmith. And Hanau was a center for goldsmiths at that time, creating jewelry. And his son, in 1814, moved to London. And he opened up a manufacturing operation in London and soon in Paris. And they were making beautiful jewelry, which they were distributing throughout Europe. And then in 1850, Strauss came and joined them, became a partner in the business, hence the name Backes Strauss.
What did Strauss bring to the table?
I think just capability. He joined as an office boy and he rose up the ranks and did so well that he became a partner in the business.
Oh, fantastic. I'd love to see some of that. Is there any place where I can see what that early 19th century catalog of stuff was?
Yeah,
you say beautiful.
Sure.
I'm so curious.
I'll share it with you.
So who was buying it at the time? I mean, I know, look, in that part of history in America, things were quite primitive. There wasn't a thriving jewelry distribution. Obviously, things were a little bit more well established in Europe. Was it just aristocrats, wealthy merchants, royalty, or was this something that whatever would go for middle class could also get?
I think middle class. I mean, you had the wealthy people buying special pieces, but the middle class. I mean, you're talking about gold pieces with some diamonds on it, reasonably priced, accessible jewelry.
Fascinating.
So,
and where was it made? Was it made in England?
In London, Paris, and in Hanau in Germany.
Okay, so it's this is very sophisticated operation.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So towards the end of the 19th century, two British explorers went to Southern Africa to explore for diamonds. Barney Barnato and Cecil Rhodes. And they discovered incredible mines.
Where exactly?
In Southern Africa.
Okay.
And they were worried that if these quantity of diamonds came onto the world market, price of diamonds would drop. So they formed a syndicate. The syndicate was formed where they would sell to a group of people on a regular period quantities of diamonds. So the supply of diamonds would be limited coming into the market.
And this worked in everyone's advantage to have this syndicate?
So 1890s, a syndicate was put together, and they invited Backes and Strauss to join this syndicate. So Backes and Strauss changed their business, transited from jewelry manufacturers to diamond dealers, diamond manufacturers.
Was that a higher margin business? Was it? I'm just curious. What was the attraction in moving the business model?
I think it was a novelty. It was, suddenly having a regular supply of rough diamonds, which you could polish and then you could sell. And we have archives, sort of end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, where the partners would travel on a business trip, and this wasn't a 2-day or a weekday business trip. They would be gone for 2 to 3 months.
Wow.
And every day they would have a ledger where they would write a letter back to head office outlining their daily activity. And we've got the copies of these letters. So they used to travel throughout Europe, all the way up to Central Europe, even Budapest, Prague, and then Italy, down to even Alexandria. They have customers in America, in Canada, in Japan.
Was it dangerous traveling with diamonds? Did they have them on them?
I presume they took stock with them,
right?
And
it's like that's who you want to rob on the road, right? Yeah. The diamond sales guys.
I have a picture of them traveling. They would be traveling with big trunks because they're traveling for 2-3 months. They'd probably have a butler with them. Or a security officer with them who'd travel with them.
Okay, so they were really set up for this.
So they were well set up, and the letters are fascinating when you read the letters. I mean, the customers' complaints. It's almost like their current problems. Prices are too high, supply is not enough, and
it's very modern. I'm sure to read it all.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that not that much changes. Even though the pictures are black and white and grainy, it's probably the same type of personalities.
Absolutely. So then we have, again, day books, which outline their sort of invoice books. And we see in 1917, 1918, Backes and Strauss selling diamonds to houses like Cartier, Boucheron, Bulgari, Mikimoto, which is very interesting. And they carried on, became a very strong diamond company. And then the Great Depression came, 1938, 39. And all of a sudden, the business collapsed.
Yeah.
Except for a customer
1929.
1929. Yeah. Except for a customer they had in the Philippines, Mr. Garcia, who kept them going.
They had one patron.
One patron who carried them through.
Lucky.
But it was difficult times, 30s, and then the war came along. So when I joined them in 1976 in Antwerp, It was a small buying office with another office in London. And we were coming up to the end of the 1970s when we had a massive inflation. I don't know if you remember, there was 28-30% inflation.
Heard about it.
Bank interest rates were up to 24-25%. And suddenly diamonds became a choice of investment.
This is also when gold had a little bit of a thing.
Gold went up to $800, and diamond D flawless, which is the sort of top color, top purity stone, went up from $6,000 to $85,000 a carat.
Wow!
In a matter of months. But then in the early 80s, it came back, tumbling back down to the original price.
When did they America abandon the gold standard? This was like in the 70s, wasn't it?
Nixon, I think it was 71, yeah.
Okay, so this was around this a
Gold
little bit.
Was up to $35 an ounce, I think, or $32 an ounce. And then Nixon took it off, and then the price of gold started moving up.
Yeah.
So by the end of the 70s, it had gone up to $850.
And at the time, the company was not involved with watches, right? Like,
no.
Right. So this is a modern thing.
So what happened was in 2003, I had the opportunity.
Jumping ahead.
So 2003, I had the opportunity to buy Backes Strauss, and
so you were working there, and you could take full control.
Yeah. What had happened was because of changes coming in the diamond business. De Beers came out and said, "You've got to go downstream to the diamond manufacturers." People didn't really understand what downstream meant. You had to open retail shops, you had to become jewelry manufacturers. So there was a certain confusion. And Backes Strauss, if you remember, was owned by Benjamin Bonus. And he was a De Beers broker. So it was a conflict of interest for him to own a diamond company whilst advising his customers. So the best thing at that time was for me to take over the business. So in 2003, I took over the business, and immediately I had this sort of passion of combining, my passion for diamonds and watches and creating a watch brand out of Backes Strauss. Remember also that it was early 2000 that diamonds suddenly appeared on watches. There was a brand called Technomarine. I don't know if you remember.
Sure. Diamonds on plastic.
Diamonds on plastic. And they
an innovation.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And they had a huge success. And I think all the other brands turned around and said, why don't we do the same thing, but on gold instead of plastic? And suddenly we noticed that there was a growth in demand from the Swiss watch industry. Prior to that, the Swiss watch industry was relatively important for us as diamond dealers, but late 1990s, early 2000, it became very significant. And I was at that time supplying diamonds to Frank Muller, preparing and supplying diamonds to Frank Muller. So I had a look into how these watch brands were doing and developing. And because of our close relationships with Frank Muller, we decided.
And Frank Muller was very hot at the time.
Very.
They were probably feeling very optimistic, and it was the beginning of the modern independence era.
Yeah.
MB&F and Urwerk were right around the corner. Yeah. They opened in 2004. So just for people listening, this was an era of, from an investor, it made a lot of sense. Like, not only are watches booming, but there's new watch brands. There's a hunger in the market for expensive stuff. There's a hunger in the market for new stuff, old names, new names. Like, there was a momentum going on that you were able to benefit from.
And creativity. I mean, what Frank Muller as a horologist managed to bring to the brand was just incredible.
So much.
and then the designs, there were.
Yeah.
You mentioned about our designs, but Frank Muller was, I think, after Gerald Genta, perhaps the most creative in creating these big size watches, which became very fashionable at that time.
Yeah, the Curvex Crazy Hours is probably the most brand-defining watch I can think of.
Absolutely, yeah. So we got set about to create this brand. So we decided a brand, you said, needs a narrative. And here we had 5 pillars on which we can build our brand. The first was the history and heritage of Backes Strauss. The second was our knowledge of diamonds. We were going to use diamonds, and we made sure that all the diamonds we use on our watches are fine quality diamonds, not just for color and purity, but we put an emphasis on cut of diamonds. Diamonds, it's all about light entering and refracting. And if a diamond is polished to perfection, you get the best refraction out of it. So we decided that all the diamonds we use are what we call hearts and arrows. And the third element was our horological credibility, which we openly said was Frank Muller. We didn't pretend to be watchmakers ourselves. We're doing it together with Frank Muller. The fourth was our provenance in London. We used London because we'd been there as a company since 1814 as the basis of our inspiration, the look and the feel of the watch. And the fifth pillar was my personal history in the watchmaking world and the diamond world through my father and myself.
That's more than most new brands have to build off of.
So, we felt that these 5 pillars would give us the basis to launch the brand. And Frank Muller were very cooperative at that time. It was a great opportunity for us. And I was given a team of designers to come up with the first designs. And we would sit in Geneva together with them, planning and talking. And
who were these designers?
They were Frank Muller team from the Frank Muller.
So they lent them to you and they say, sit with Vartkess and make him happy?
Yeah. And we were not making any progress. So one day I decided there's only one thing to do, pack them all together and take them to London.
Of course,
and then
naturally.
We would walk around the streets of London, and at the end of the day, we would sit down and debrief.
So I think it's interesting. So before you made this diversion and you were in Geneva, like what types of designs are they coming up with, and why were you not happy with it?
Because they were not resonating with the Britishness of the brand I wanted to create. The look was wrong. They were sort of very Swiss.
Right. Was it generic or just totally wrong personality-wise?
I just felt that the environment was wrong for them. They were looking at the Alps, the Lake Geneva, the cows, and that was their inspiration. So I said, I must take them to London. So they came to London.
Artists need to be inspired. We all know this.
100%. And at the end of each day, we would go to a pub, have a pint of beer, and then debrief on their experiences. And they kept pointing out, saying, Regent Street. I don't know if you've been to London.
Sure.
And I was a student, I'd lived in London, and I knew Regent Street, but I thought, what's so great about Regent Street? And then they would, they'd take me to Piccadilly Circus and say, look at this. And you could see this beautiful construction of buildings, sort of symmetric, circular.
Yeah, it's all very flush, but it turns. It's very nice.
Yeah, and I had never noticed that because walking on Regent Street, my attention was always grabbed by the retail shops. So looking out, I saw this.
So you never noticed that? Because I remember the first time I was 18 years old on Regent Street. It's the first thing I noticed because I'd never been to a place that had that exact look of the architecture.
I think when you live in a place, you don't notice it as much as people visiting. Yeah. And suddenly through their eyes, I could see a new London. And then we investigated that obviously this was the architecture of John Nash, who was at the beginning of the 19th century heavily subsidized by the Prince Regent to create what is most of modern London today, if you see. So our first design was the oval-shaped watch, which we called the Regent.
Yeah, which is beautiful.
Yeah, and I remember when we first presented this to Frank Muller, they laughed. They said, oval watches, you'll never sell them.
Oh, because of the ellipse.
They said, anyway, give it a try. But it has been our most iconic shape.
But it's funny because oval shape, anyone that knows aesthetics is like, wow, that looks really pretty on the wrist. Like, that's nice. But you're right. Market-wise, like, there's been some famous misses.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most beautiful ones was the Parmigiani had the Ovale, which is a gorgeous watch. I've never even seen one in the wild. I'm lucky that you hit it with yours because I think people are afraid, but it is like the unknown great look on your wrist. Like everyone should try an oval watch. Sorry, I'll stop.
No, you're absolutely right. And then, of course, the beauty of this watch was not just the shape, but it's how Frank Muller were able to give it two curves. So it sits beautifully on your wrist, and then you have also a curve along the top. So it's not just an oval watch flat. It's got curves, and it flows. Now,
at the beginning, was the Backes Strauss watches priced similar to Frank Muller? Was there a worry about positioning them differently? I'm just wondering if there was, because I know like at Richemont, for example, they don't want things to necessarily compete. Did you have limitations?
No.
Okay.
Because predominantly most of our watches at that time were covered in diamonds.
Okay, and theirs weren't, not yet.
They were, but different quality diamonds.
Okay.
Ours were more expensive because we elected to go for the top quality.
And you felt that there was a buyer. The buyer would know the difference. Because I think there's also this idea that some buyers don't know, and then there's buyers that do know. Yeah. But there's buyers that can look at a diamond cover watch and be like, this is crap stones, this is amazing stones.
Well, when you put two watches next to each other, you can tell very quickly ideal cut diamonds have more brilliance.
We've seen it. I've been shocked at some of the good brands that use bad stones.
Yeah.
And, you look at the prices, and some brand like Cartier, I think, is usually pretty good. They charge a lot for it, but it's pretty good. Yeah. But I've been shocked sometimes at the like really low quality stones that we see. And, you're absolutely right. If you're interested in diamond watches or diamonds in general, you need to learn yourself. You need to know with your own eyes what a good stone versus a not good stone looks like.
Yeah, this is our advantage, And to carry on with the design, so the next design was the Barclay, which is the square-shaped, which I think is one of your favorites.
Yeah.
And that was from Berkeley Square, which is one of the oldest squares in London. And then the round one we had to call Piccadilly because Piccadilly is the epicenter of London. And so that way we got our three collections. And that's how we launched. But then there was a very interesting story because suddenly I was moving from diamond business into the world of luxury. Because by then, the world of luxury was beginning to move forward. And we were all struggling with the definition of the word luxury. And I'm sure today, if you put what is luxury in front of 10 people, you'll get 15 different answers.
Oh, it's a great conversation.
And I wasn't able to grasp the meaning of luxury properly. I went to seminars, I participated in debates, went to consultants to try and understand. And
I had a quick definition for it because I like very concise, clear definitions. Yeah. And I've had this conversation. Not everyone likes this definition, but do you want to know the definition I came up with for luxury?
Please.
The opposite of efficiency.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Luxury is about extra.
Yeah.
Luxury is all the margins in life where you can spare a little space. You have a little rest. You have a little extra. It's a little bit better than it needs to be. All those things that are not purely efficient is where luxury is.
Yeah, you're right. But one of these seminars I attended was organized by an association called Walpole, which was British luxury brands got together and they held a seminar. And they had a speaker for this particular seminar, and his name was Lou Frankfurter. He was at that time CEO of Coach Bags.
Okay.
And Lou got up and he made a fantastic, I'm talking about 2005. He got up and made a fantastic presentation, told us how he grew the company, everything. Everyone gave him a standing ovation and we sat down, except someone in the back of the room got up and he said, I don't understand what you're doing here. Have you come to the right meeting? And we turned around and saw this gentleman, and Lou Frankfurter got up and the organizer said, no, he's our guest speaker. And the guy in the back said, I don't see any relationship between Coach and luxury. And then Lou got up and he said, let me tell you, when I came in, the share price was 25 cents. It is now $25. And he said, no. Luxury has got nothing to do with share prices. So by now, we were fascinated by this person sitting in the back of the room. And we all turned our chairs around and faced him. And he said, okay, I'll throw you a challenge. Name me one American luxury brand. So someone said, Tiffany's. And he said the average price of a Tiffany product at that time, 2005, was $75 or $80.
Yeah, the little silver bracelet.
Trinkets and everything. So he said, hardly luxury. Someone said Ralph Lauren. He said, don't, you'll struggle. He said luxury is mainly a European phenomenon. It was created in the Europe of 17th, 18th century, where normally you had kings and queens in their realm who at that time would be the most wealthiest, the most powerful person in their country. And they would send for craftsmen. And the craftsmen would appear before them. And they would be given a commission to make a throne, to make jewelry, to make a pocket watch, to design something for them. And the craftsman would go away with a commission to be very creative, to use the best raw materials, the best craftsmen, to come with the most original design to present to the king or the queen. 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road, they would turn up, they would present this to the court, to the king, and if they liked it, they put it on, they used it, then the entire court, all the noblemen in court would aspire to own one of these pieces or something similar. And to me, that was the eureka moment. This is what luxury is about, bespoke, something special. As, in a way, similar to what you defined it in one word.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been interesting to be there, right? Yeah. Because I love the difference between someone saying it's a great company because it makes money versus it's a great company because it makes a great product and not having to care about money. And those are completely different perspectives, and they will not result in the same brand ever.
Yeah.
And what I've always said is that the promise for me of a luxury watch is when the people making it try to make it as good as possible without regard for the price.
Exactly.
And that's a fluid concept, sure, but that's what attracts me. I don't want to look at something that's trying to fit a price point. I want something which is better than the other stuff I have around me.
Yeah.
I want it to be that one thing where I feel like, wow, this is an apex of human achievement right here. Even if my shoes are not great, something's wrong with my home, at least I have this one thing on me that reaches very, very high. And you can't reach high with efficiency. It's a paradox.
And it's the originality, the uniqueness, the special design, the craftsmanship. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're agreeing. It's just, I get excited because it's been a while since I've got to have the let's define luxury conversation because everyone in our industry is over it already. They're like, oh, not this thing again.
Yeah.
So let's sort of fast forward a little bit to to today. So early 2000, Backes Strauss gets off the ground as a watch brand through a strategic relationship with Frank Muller.
Yeah.
Frank Muller makes the watches, and which is great because that's always the hardest thing at a high price point, is to make sure you have a fantastic product. And no one doubts that Frank Muller is exceptionally good at what they do in making a nice watch. And today, through the fact that we're in another sort of recessionary period, it's a crowded market with a lot of brands and things like that. You're incredibly passionate and you love what you do. What is the strength of Backes Strauss? What do you do that if people knew more about it, they'd say, you know what, they're doing that really, really well. I admire Backes Strauss and the sea of other luxury watches and ones with diamonds. In your opinion, what are you doing better than anyone else right now?
Well, I think we're remaining true to our values. We're very strict on trying to accomplish what we set off to do, to create something very different, to give an originality, and to create pieces that people, when they wear it, will define their character, will define their personality, not the watch defining them, but they defining the watch they're wearing.
Sure.
Which I think is so important. And
I always say it this way: are you wearing the watch, or is the watch wearing you?
Exactly. That's a very good description. And I see this very much because, right at the beginning, we went to consultants. They were saying, you shouldn't be in this market, you should be in that market. And I was told that Japan is not a market to be in for us because of what we were trying to do. And
who said that to you?
Consultants in 2005, 2006. And yet, today, Japan is our biggest market. And when I see in Japan, because, we all think of the Japanese as being followers rather than being discerning, we sell some exceptional pieces in Japan to this very discerning clientele who take a long time to make up their mind, but they study, they love the story, they love the creativity, and they love wearing watches that are different.
And the customers in Japan that love you, what do they want from you? I'm sure they say, Vartkess, make this, do more of that. I'd love to see this from the brand. What kind of feedback do they consistently give you from that corner of the world?
I always feel originality. If you go with something very creative, and especially a unique piece, they love having this specific watch made for them. I remember once I was there and this lady wanted to buy a watch, a full diamond watch which we'd made. But I had designed the dial to be a mother of pearl dial to give the rest of the watch brilliance. But she said, I'm
like
going
the Queen
to buy
of Hearts?
This. No. It was a watch we'd done in collaboration with William Goldberg of New York, the Ashoka watch. And the lady said, I'm going to buy this watch, but I want the dial set in pavé diamonds. And I said, absolutely, no problem. I came back and we're looking with the technical department, and they said, this is going to be very difficult because the diamonds have to be incredibly small. They have to be 0.5 millimeters.
Wow.
And imagine we have to polish these 0.5 millimeter diamonds to ideal cuts, which is a complication beyond complication. And we had to do it, 252 stones. And these diamonds were the equivalent of 1,250 stones per carat. So you can imagine how tiny they were.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did it and we delivered it to her. It took us some time.
How do you charge for that? Can you charge extra? I mean, how does that work?
No, I had to take that on board because I thought it was going to be a straightforward operation. It was my error. But it was a very expensive move, but it was incredibly appreciated by the lady because it was something special and no one else would have done it for her.
And that's also part of luxury is you performing that service. A human being who has skill and taste, doing something special for you, the customer. That is what people pay for a lot.
Yeah,
that is a valuable thing to them.
Yeah, and we don't tell the story enough. But when I used to travel meeting clients, they all had this impression that in this day and age, the small diamonds we set on watches, we put the rough diamond in a machine. The machine polishes it, and it shoots out these diamonds, which we then put into another machine. It does all the setting.
No.
And then you explain this to people that each stone has to be polished individually. And to help illustrate this, we created a watch which we call the Monarch, where on one particular model we have, I think, 1,080 diamonds.
Wow.
Set on the dial and on the case. And when you say to them that there are 58 facets on each diamond, and they've all been manufactured or polished by a human being, and then sorted for color, millimeter size, purity, and then set individually by a diamond setter, you can then understand the skills, the crafts, and the timing of this production.
So I got into watches through, complicated watches and sport watches and things like that, never jewelry watches. And then when I started going to these Swiss manufacturers, and of course, naturally, in addition to the grand complications, they'd have diamond set ones, they'd be like, hey, check out what this actually takes.
Yeah.
And I saw the stones and I saw the skill required. And I realized that even if a movement has just the time, the stones and all that take often way more time than even decorating the movement.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, you can't even always charge for that.
Yeah, you're right.
So there's this hidden complication that exists in just actually assembling the jewelry watches. Designing them is one thing, making sure the stones are put in the right way. It's a very architectural process, thinking about how the light refracts, as you said, but just the artisanship of setting stones one by one. There's no automated way of doing it. Even if the stone wasn't of a high quality, it still takes the same time to put it in there and attach it. And there isn't like cases that are just pre-drilled. Oftentimes, each hole needs to be drilled. The little claws need to be made. The stone needs to be set. It's a different type of workbench. But if you look at the price of a gem set watch and ask yourself, why is it expensive? It's rarely just the value of the stone. There's hundreds of hours of labor that went into assembling it. And I think that people would appreciate these watches all the more if they had a little bit more awareness. Because again, what do we see? We always see the videos of the watchmaker polishing the bridge with the screwdriver. It's so difficult to assemble the tourbillon. What would you say in the gem setting world is like the equivalent of a tourbillon? It's like a hard thing to do. Maybe people don't appreciate it, but you love it when you see the result.
We've just we created a watch earlier last year, which we called the Namib Sun, because all the diamonds were sourced from Namibia, a mine in Namibia. And the case of the watch was set in white baguette diamonds, invisibly set. But the dial,
hard to do.
But the dial, we decided to set with these fancy vivid yellow diamonds from Namibia. So they were all square cut, and they had to be set on a dial of a 40 millimeter watch. So imagine, when you polish colored diamonds, diamonds like fancy yellow diamonds, and you lose the angles, you lose the color.
Really?
So,
Yeah.
So each stone, I think we had 96 stones which we polished to set on the dial, had to be repolished to be perfectly identical to each other.
Wow.
But not only identical to each other, we had to keep the angles so that the color of the diamond remains. So when you set it on the dial, it's one color.
So difficult to do.
It was so difficult, but we managed to do it. And again, it takes craftsmen and skilled craftsmen hours and hours to do this.
Vartkess, we're almost out of time, and there's just so much stuff we can talk about. I want to hear from you. What do you think watch lovers should be excited about what you're doing right now and what was coming up? Every brand, of course, is always undergoing developments. We recently wrote about your sort of entry-level version of the Barkley watch. There's a review on aBlogtoWatch. And that is, of course, your son's doing, who wants to have more of an entry-level model, which I think is a wise thing to do. I guess, in the remaining minute or two, explain, what is Backes & Strauss working on right now? What should people look out for from the brand? Because I think that if you are in the market for the gem set watches, and not just that, right? The watch I just wrote about, other than in the crown, it's a steel watch. So share a little bit about why you think people should be enthusiastic about what you and your team are working on.
So you mentioned my son Levon, who joined me in 2016. And he's been an observer looking at how the brand has been developing and how the market outside has developed. And he wants to create within the brand the possibility for people to come and enjoy Backes & Strauss at a lower entry level than we used to have, and be creative on the ergonomics, the looks of the watch, the feel of the watch, but always staying true to our DNA, our story. And then we still focus for the special pieces we do for our diamond-loving clients, doing bespoke pieces for clients.
Gorgeous stuff, by the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. So there is this element of youth, and I was listening to one of your podcasts, which I enjoy very much, by the way.
Thank you.
And you mentioned that it's not young people who we have to talk to, it's watch lovers, people who today are very knowledgeable about what watchmaking is. And you have to be able to have a discourse with them, be able to listen to what their needs are, and be able to create what they want.
Yes. It's a market where you're educating them on how to appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you're going full steam ahead with that. Well, that's great. Well, this has been the Superlative Podcast interview with Vartkess Knadjian, CEO of Backes & Strauss. I encourage you to visit the website, www.backesandstrauss.com. Vartkess, thank you so much.
Ariel, enjoyed it very much. Thank you.